As I said, this is a goose feather, but you can use a turkey feather. In fact, I've gone out in the alley. I live in a city, and I've picked up pigeon feathers, and they work great. So I know Mom told me that I didn't know where those had been, but they worked really well. Anyhow, I've loaded it up with some paint, and we're going to come over here to the demonstration board and just start pulling a broad band of color. And feathers are really neat to work with. They make a really nice texture. In fact, I think most people think of feathers when they think of faux marble. They always think that you use a feather. And there's maybe a good reason for it, because they do make such nice marks, and they can look very marbly. And it's just a matter of pulling some color across in whatever kind of pattern or whatever size you want. In this case, I don't want to fill in everywhere because I'm going to go in and use some other color as well. But I do want to try to make it look somewhat continuous. So I'm going to go through wherever the paint is extra heavy and try to take a little of that out here and there. And try to make it look also, like with the other ones, as if it's part of a bigger piece, so that it didn't just start at this edge and it didn't end at this edge, that we've just simply taken a little piece out of a huge sheet, or even out of a huge quarry of marble. And the nice thing with the floating marbles is that it's hard to make any mistakes. If you really feel that you've done something that you don't like, you can go in and wipe it out and start again, at least within a reasonable period of time. In this case, we're once again kind of doing a sort of drifting motion, and I've left these areas that I want to go in and put in a lighter color, but I just want to, at this point, have a few little bit thicker and thinner areas. We're going to do the softening just like we did in the last demonstration, which will even that out, but I don't want it to be totally even, so I want to leave myself a few thick areas where I've got little bits of thicker paint. Here's kind of a nice, gentle, almost vein, we could call it, and as well as another thinner one right here, and a couple of spots, and so on. This is the kind of thing that I want to fix, though. It looks like you just laid the feather on the edge and started pulling it back. And to me, that kind of says that you were at the edge. So take a little bit of time and go back on things like that and stroke them out to the edge. If you're trying to do the piece around a corner too, why obviously you try to match up. If you have a white line right at this edge, try to keep it white on that corner and put your paint so that it looks as if it's a continuous piece of marble. Most of the time you'll just be doing a top of something, and you don't have to try to make it look like it's really a thick piece. But if you're going around the edges, keep that in mind. Anyhow, I think that this looks pretty much the way I want it. And I can go back in and add some of this color later if I need to. So I just want to wipe out some of this paint. I'm not worried about getting the feather clean, but I do want to get rid of some of that color just because it otherwise will mingle a little too much with this second creamier or lighter color. And there will be some blending on the sample or on the marble itself, and I want that, but I just don't want to have some color that comes out in between on the feather. And now I'm simply going back into some of these white areas. And this paint isn't a real dark paint, but it is darker than the white. And in a little bit you'll be able to see why I like the white background. But I am going in and just touching in. In some of these areas you don't have to be real picky, just get some paint in there, because again we'll be blending that, and we'll be able to blend one area into another. Now here I've got a larger area of it, and as I've mentioned sometimes, you want to keep some sense of proportion on the colors. I don't like to have a 50-50 mix. That usually looks kind of static, kind of boring. So in this case, the majority of it is this wonderful yellow ochre color, and kind of the minority will be the ivory, the lighter shades of ivory. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and soften it, just like in the last demonstration. And I used this brush, which is a standard paint brush, to soften in our previous demonstration. But for this one, I'm going to introduce another brush, which is a badger hair blender or softening brush. And that's specifically what they're made for. You can see the kind of the unusual coloring of the hair. It is from a badger. And these brushes are made just for softening. They're not really made at all for dipping into paint. They're much too soft, and they won't hold paint particularly well. So you're essentially just using the very, very ends of this. You're not ever dipping this brush into a can. And this just is a little bit softer. It's a little bit easier to use, especially if you're just starting out. And like the earlier demonstration, I just want to start usually at one direction first and work it. And I'm going to once again start kind of at the bottom and stroke up to begin with. These brushes are so soft that, as I say, you'll have to use a little bit more pressure to get the softening effects sometimes. But beginners like using these, and they are wonderful, just because you don't over soften or mush the paint around. And you can see that this is just softly blending the colors into each other, but we're still getting some distinctive marks, certainly the heavier areas of paint particularly. And sometimes, in fact, this may not give me as much softening as I want in certain areas, and I'll go back with the stiffer brush that I used before to get a little bit more softening. But I've done it this first direction, as I usually like to do, and now I like to just switch directions to kind of every direction. And oftentimes, you can just go up and down if you'd like to do that. You can do figure eights if that's what works, whatever feels comfortable, and you'll develop your own style, your own technique for the softening.